Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our readers and listeners of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a comfortable position, along with your favorite beverage, to enjoy the discussion. We remind our audience to examine the show notes attached to each of our shows to better understand how our program functions. Before we get into our discussion, we want to say thanks for questions coming from our audience at SmithWeekly, including Nick W., Brent S., Todd A., and Linda S. On SmithWeekly Discussions today is a new guest of a returning company. David D'Onofrio has joined us. David is CEO and Director of White Gold Corp, a Yukon-focused gold project explorer and developer advancing a number of projects in the White Gold District. White Gold has a substantial land package in the district and key JV relations with Agnico Eagle and Kinross. White Gold is currently a portfolio holding at SmithWeekly Research. The company is listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the symbol WGO and also on the US OTC markets under the symbol WHGOF. David, welcome to the show, and how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, David, you're new to the show, and of course, Shawn Ryan was on here last time about a year and a half ago. Let's kick it off here just briefly with a little bit on your relevant background and experience in this sector.
So I am also part of the Power One Capital Group. Power One is a fully integrated merchant bank. We're based in Toronto. We've been around for almost 20 years now. And we're a sector agnostic investment group, but we've really, entered the market, cut our teeth in the natural resource sector, right in the early 2000s, and that has always been a cornerstone of our business. And our focus has been on generally in the resource and development part of that sector. And fortunately, over the last almost 20 years, we've been able to participate with some very high profile success stories, and along the way develop some incredible relationships with some very talented management teams, and work with some of the best mining companies from around the globe. It's that kind of experience that's really now starting to actually pay dividends as an investment group, because over the years you sort of get to meet these special and very capable individuals, and as they go on to have their success and look to launch new projects, based on our relationships, we're able to get sort of called very early on in the formation phases of these companies and be able to participate in a lot of great opportunities. And that's sort of what we're seeing currently, where we're involved with a lot of the same management teams that we've had such good success with in the past on new type ventures. And White Gold is exactly that type of a story, where we've known Shawn Ryan for a long time. We've been major investors in the Yukon, big believers, and when he brought this opportunity to us a few years ago, we immediately saw the benefit. I'm sure Shawn touched on that. Happy to get into that a little more through our conversation, but just we're thrilled to be able to sort of participate with such a highly decorated and successful prospector as Shawn Ryan, with what we believe is going to be a generational, incredibly unique opportunity in a tier one mining jurisdiction with rich and prolific history that's literally have seen almost next to no modern day exploration. So something very special. We were all in right from the beginning, and not surprising, that's why I was able to attract the attention of the likes of Kinross and Agnico.
And David, before we get into White Gold, talk a little bit more about Power One, led by yourself and Pat DiCapo. You've made a number of natural resource sector investments, as you stated, including some in the uranium sector as well. You've been in most of these businesses within the natural resource sector entirely. But maybe you can just talk about Pat for a moment, and then also talk about Power One's shareholding ownership in White Gold.
Sure. Pat is a very unique individual, and he's really built a model as a founder of Power One that's led to its success. He values the strategic benefit of working with the right people in properly structuring companies. And his model as being a very patient investor really has allowed him to be as successful as he and the firm has been in the resource sector. The resource sector is very cyclical, as we all know. which, in the bad times makes it very tough. But, when you're in the bright part of the cycle, the opportunity is, very unique, from a capital markets and financial perspective. And if you're able to find the right types of projects and bring in the right people to help operate them, you can sleep well at night knowing you have a world-class asset, and maybe in the short term not necessarily worry about how the market may value that, as long as you can keep the capital structure intact, protect the shareholders, and wait for the right time. You can optimize your opportunity to be very successful in that industry. And we're seeing that today. Perfect case studies of that thesis in the uranium sector. There's some uranium companies that we've been involved with for well over a decade now. Encore Uranium's one of them. Laramide's another one. These are companies that are run by very highly capable individuals with a tremendous amount of expertise in the uranium sector. They have some very significant assets in the United States. And after it's been close to 10 years now where the cycle's been so out of favor, but there, we kind of had the thesis that if you can stick it out and wait it out and protect the capital structure of the company, when the cycle does turn, the opportunities will be second to none, because there really is, as I'm sure you and your listeners are aware, very few uranium names out there. That sector's become topical. Obviously, this whole green metal theme is at the forefront of everyone's mind, as it rightly should be, I think, in this political and economic environment that we're in today. And these types of opportunities are going to be the first to move, and there's not many like them. And in particular, where you have political enthusiasm as well, in addition to the commodity price movement, like we see in the uranium and a lot of these strategic minerals, where the U.S. and other countries have declared priority in funding exploration and development for strategic and other purposes, looking to reduce their reliance on certain other jurisdictions. These type of industries will see significant influxes of capital, like we're starting to see now. And when you have the leading assets with the right management team, the capital is going to pour to these few names, and that's when you can hopefully see some exceptional returns that will pay for the wait. That's certainly the case for those couple. For better or worse, we have a number of names in our portfolio which are in that situation. Along this green metal theme, lithium is certainly very topical these days. That's a sector we've been involved with since 2008. We were actually part of the group that took Lithium Americas public. It was the first IPO of a brine lithium company ever in Toronto, actually, and it was so novel to the extent that the geos at the OSC didn't even, understand what a lithium brine deposit was. So, we had to kind of partly educate them as part of the listing process. And, that company sort of came out of the gate hot, but, it's sometimes when you're, early or too early, which we certainly were then. This was before Tesla even went public. People heard of an electric car, maybe, really didn't understand the potential. And, it's taken, we're 12 years ahead now, and really until now for, we start to see the realization of this transformation and decarbonization of transportation. And so that company's went through a few iterations, but we brought in, Magna, Mitsubishi very early on. It was backed by a good team. It was a great asset. So, you just kind of got to work with the management team to advance it as smartly as possible. And when the time is right, look where it is today. It's now listed on the New York Stock Exchange. It's a multi-billion-dollar asset, and very exciting prospects as probably one of the next producers. And along my earlier sort of discussion around being able to work with these capable entrepreneurs or geologists or whatever you want to call them, we had the good fortune of being able to work with Waldo Perez. After the Lithium Americas, he went on to found another lithium company based in Argentina called Neolithium. We were his early partner in that. We listed it on TSX Venture a few years ago, and that again, he's gone on to find another world-class asset. They released their pre-feasibility study a couple of years ago with just astronomical valuation. I think it was around $1.1 billion US. But the market at the time, wasn't as focused on, green metals, whether it was cannabis or crypto or whatever it was, this is speculative money had different attention. But here we are now in this environment. You have this world-class asset. It was just validated in terms of quality, in my opinion, by the fact that they were able to attract CATL, the largest battery manufacturer in the world, as a strategic shareholder. They bought 8% of the company. And why that's particularly important in that sector is, unlike gold and copper, where you pull it out of the ground, there's a buyer for it. This stuff is very highly specialized. It's a real chemistry experiment. You need to have the right metallurgical components and the ability to obtain the purity levels needed for a battery. And I think with them making that investment, that sort of should signal to the market that this particular brine, which we thought all along it did, meets these characteristics. And actually, just today, they put out a press release showing that their brine can meet these sort of ultra high purity qualifications that is required by these battery manufacturers. So that's another story based on 10 plus years of relationships, but understanding the sector, working with the right people, and now we see this it's come into favor, and the returns are quite exceptional.
Yeah, and I want to bring this back to white gold for a sec, because you're the only guy at Power One that's actually out there running white gold. I mean, Pat DiCapo is not really too involved himself, and you're not involved with being on these other companies specifically, except for white gold. So talk about that importance, and talk about how vested Power One is into white gold.
That's that good for you to sort of pick up on that. Not something maybe necessarily advertised, but these other type companies, which are part of our core positions that we think about and work on every day, and it's not in a direct management or even a directorship role usually. Something we're always doing, because at the end of the day, we're equity shareholders in this like everyone else. We've written checks into it like everyone else, and our goal is for this equity value to appreciate. The white gold story is no different in that regard. Where it is unique is that we were able to work with Shawn so very closely in the formation of this company that it almost felt like we were part of the management team. And what was a little bit different is that, unlike a lot of founders who want to wear all these different hats in their companies, Shawn, he wasn't necessarily interested in that. Like, he recognizes what he's good at and what he likes to do, which is being in the field, prospecting, analyzing data, looking for technological advancements to help sort of be able to advance his exploration methodologies. That's what he wants to do, and that's what he wants to focus on, and that's what he's good at. And that's how businesses should be run. A small business, unfortunately, the resources aren't necessarily there to allow people to specialize like that. But when Shawn kind of indicated that was his interest, that led us to think like, well, what, that could really work out well. So now, typically in the junior resource space, you'll see a CEO, especially if they're a GO, they're kind of doing that. Plus, they have to take on the task of running the capital markets, marketing, etc. Well, hey, you know what? Listen, we're Shawn's partner. Why don't we divide and conquer here? Let Shawn do what it is that he likes to do and he's an expert at. And we, as the Power One group, like, I'm sitting in the chair, but I really feel like it's effectively, the entire Power One group sitting in the chair, being able to manage the capital markets and running the corporate side of the business, which is what we like to do, what we're, good at. And it's really worked out well, in terms of being able to optimize our resources.
David, talk about just your guys' allocation into the company. I mean, is white gold your guys' largest allocation?
It's a very significant investment for us. We are check writers. We've written checks alongside of Agnico and Kinross, and recently Eric Sprott, and all the different financings. And it financially, it's very significant for us in terms of what we've invested. But we truly believe that this company is one of those premier, like, generational type opportunities. I think we're heading into the right sector. I mean, our share price doesn't reflect it today, but we think that the value in this company is literally second to none, and have never sort of been more optimistic about the prospects of this company. Opportunities like this will help us better articulate what we're doing to unlock that value and where we are in that process. but it is certainly, one of the things we are, most directly involved with. Obviously, myself as a CEO, it's the first thing I think of in the morning, and and last thing I think of when I go to bed. And in addition to working on it all day long, and I really, do believe that this company, with the assets we have that are already established, and the size of our land package, with the history it has, and the exploration success we've had to date, what we're seeing, the potential is second to none, especially in a tier 1 jurisdiction like we have in the Yukon. And this is what Agnico sees, this is what Kinross sees, this is what Eric Sprott sees. This is we've had a number of highly sophisticated investors in our company, and I don't doubt that this will realize. I think we're very fortunate that we have the right market here to be able to capitalize on this, and I'm very hopeful that we're going to start to see that value come back more clearly appreciated by the market. Like even the analysts who cover us, I think there's a couple, and the average target price is north of $3 here. Notwithstanding that we're trading at 75 cents here. And sort of the way I put it, I've mentioned this maybe on one or two of these other video interviews that are out there, is think about an exploration company, right? You start, and what's your goal, right? You're hoping to find a sniff of something. Then you got to raise a bunch of capital. You got to work on it. There's a tremendous amount of risk. It takes a long time for these things to be successful. White Gold, what it has, it's got this pure blue sky opportunity, but this flagship gold and saddle asset we have, that's already been done. Like the probabilities in the exploration game are so slim to actually being able to find what will be an economic deposit. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of expertise. That's already been done. This company already has in it the benefit of over 10 years of exploration work, over $100 million being spent, the benefit of being able to track two major mining companies as partners. If I told you that at the beginning, if I said, hey, listen, Mr. Investor, if I can guarantee to you that I'm going to find a world-class discovery, I'm going to get this taken out, I'm going to be able to raise $100 million, I'm going to be able to bring in two world-class partners, Eric Sprott, Power One, people like that, and I'm trading at 75% today, and this thing's going to be valued at north of $3. Like, would you want to invest? The answer is going to be yes. And well, that's what White Gold has, and that's not even giving consideration to everything else we have, which is what the company was initially founded on, that people were very excited about today. So the story really has it all from my perspective. As you mentioned, we've been doing this for a long time, and I don't doubt that the market's going to realize that, and we just have to continue to do what we're doing corporately and in the field to continue to increase the value for our shareholders.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to some degree, sometimes the market is confused short term on what the strategy is. And I want to talk about that more in a moment. It's always good to see management writing checks instead of just collecting them. That's always a good start.
Unfortunately, and this, whether here or there, because of our other dealings, like, this, I don't need to fortunately rely on a check from White Gold, as a livelihood. So, Shawn Ryan takes zero salary. I probably take, a fraction of what a typical CEO salary would be. And, we want to see the money go in the ground, because that's where we're going to get the best return for it as shareholders.
Yes, absolutely agreed. That's why it's in our portfolio. And the share price, I believe, will move. It's been choppy and fairly quiet, but nonetheless, when it does start to move, I think that there is a desire from management to look at multiple million-ounce deposits, not just one deposit, not just two deposits, but there's a potential to have a lot here. And so that's what we see. And I think that's what some of these other folks who have come in see as well. Let's back up just for a moment. I just wanted to ask you briefly your thoughts on the gold market here, David. Do we go lower? Do we stay the same? Or do we go higher in 2021 onward?
Notwithstanding some choppiness that could be coming up, with the election, wrapping up and some other things, I fundamentally think we will see an increase, a continued increase in the gold price. I don't know how dramatic it will or won't be, but I think there's a lot of stimulus. I'm not an economist, but there's a lot of stimulus, going into the world, as we all know. That's going to be buying things. That's going to have an effect on the value of currencies. If traditionally that would sort of, devalue currency. If that's going to happen with the US dollar, like we've, I think, started to see a little bit, that's going to be reflected in increased commodity prices. But with that said, I think, as a June, it's good for market sentiment. It's good for the majors who continue to print more cash the higher the price goes. But fundamentally, as a junior exploration company, we shouldn't necessarily need to be as sensitive to that. It's more binary. Like, are you going to make a discovery or are you not? And whether the gold price is 1750, 1850, or 1950, that shouldn't make such a difference, right? And I know with our, again, like, depends on who you're talking to, who gets more excited about what. I'm equally excited, but I sleep very well at night knowing we have, almost 1.8 million ounces, 2+ grams open pit. At gold prices anywhere near here, this is, in my view, and based on some desktop studies we've done, the possibility of being a robustly economic deposit, right? And that's, understood by others out there too, which is why the phone is ringing by interested parties. So I think it's going to go higher. Fundamentally, that's good for the whole sector because it just brings more eyeballs and capital to the sector, which, again, the tide is going to, the rising tide raises all boats. But I'm a little bit less sort of focused on that on a day-to-day basis, to be honest. But I do think we're heading into a strong gold. I think we're heading into a strong commodities market in general, actually.
Yeah, certainly agreed. Gold makes up a big part for us. Copper and some other base metals is important to us. And then, of course, uranium is very important to us. And we've done a lot of homework on the sector and know what needs to happen and what will happen. David, talk about the Yukon for a moment from a jurisdictional risk standpoint, because we've gotten a little bit of negativity coming out of here on the regulatory and social side, but maybe you can kind of set the record straight a little bit here. What are your thoughts on appetite for developers to do business in the Yukon? What's your thoughts on the Yukon as a jurisdiction? Still one of the better ones in Canada. What's your thoughts?
I think it's one of the better ones in Canada and certainly one of the better ones in the world. From our perspective, I couldn't, imagine more support and better, support, receptiveness to what it is we're working on doing from the government at all different levels within the Yukon. There, you can't ask for a better validation of that comment than the federal government and the territorial government announcing a multi-$100 million infrastructure program to support the exploration and development industries in the Yukon. That was, I think it was 2017, it was announced, called the Resource Gateway Project, where the Prime Minister and the Premier were in Dawson and they announced this program, and it was $360 million to upgrade existing roads within the Yukon, a number of districts, strictly for the purpose of advancing, mineral development in the Yukon. That was broken up into 3 different districts. And let me touch on that later, because I think this is kind of going to get back into some of this conversations you may have in terms of support. But a big part of that was in our district, and where it is planned, and it is moving forward. And this is the year I think we're going to start seeing Earth starting to move. It was a road going from Dawson, or an upgrade to the existing roads, which are mainly placer roads now, from Dawson right down to Gold Corp's coffee project at the time. And as we know, Newmont acquired Gold Corp and is now the owner of that asset. So that has changed the timeline for the development of that project, which is unfortunate for us because, as we all know, in an emerging district, it's that first operation that sort of, takes the most amount of confidence and faith to get underway. But once that's there, it's a domino effect for seeing all this other sort of additional infrastructure build on and projects come underway. We can chat about that in a little bit. But, to your first point is like, what kind of support is there? Like, you tell me other places in the world where you see that happening. And that's just roads. There's other infrastructure, and that's a funded program, by the way. So that money is sitting in an escrow fund for this. In 2 of the other districts, the earth has started to move. That's being moved forward. So that, there's not many places that I'm aware of where you're seeing that kind of support, and that's just for the roads. So there's airport improvements, there's other types of infrastructure, housing, sewage, et cetera, et cetera. So you couldn't ask for a better backdrop. What we've sort of heard, and what's unique about the Yukon is there's, from a First Nations perspective, there's different groups in different areas. Now, generally, the Yukon is one of the most progressive and has some of the best relationships in Canada with the First Nations. In our district, particularly, I think we have an excellent relationship with the First Nations, and the First Nations, the different groups have excellent relationships with the government. Some of these other areas aren't exactly that situation, and there has been, different pushbacks for different projects or different aspects of projects over the years. But where we are now, those are all nothing that hasn't been resolved. And I think a lot of that was sort of administrative, the way sort of certain approvals were filed, versus what some people maybe want to see things happening in a couple steps versus it all getting lumped into one type of approval. So there's some semantics around that. Generally, I think it's supportive. We're obviously very on top of that. That's what our intel says for those other districts. Our district, though, I think we've been very fortunate. You saw Gold Corp was racing ahead to build their mine. And that would have been in production this year. So, that was all, worked out. And that's, your best indication of the type of support you can have. And, and other, like Victoria Gold, they commissioned their mine this year. Like there's, I think, 2 other mines that are now fully permitted that are going into production. So things are very much happening in the Yukon. And I think, some of the noise gets a little bit more maybe airtime than, all the other positive stuff that's happening. But generally speaking, from my perspective, the Yukon continues to be an excellent place to do business and invest.
Yeah, if you could handle well the social part of that and dealing with the government in a good way, I think that works out pretty well. And certainly Yukon's, in my opinion, can be better than Ontario for new project permitting, et cetera. And then, you have Labrador, which is, a little bit more easygoing, if you will. And, BC is more challenging. Go ahead and just update us here on the current capital structure of White Gold as far as the shares out. And if you would, can you also just include the percentages of the major shareholders you'd like to point out, or approximate numbers, and then cash on hand?
Right. So we have about 130 million shares outstanding right now. Major shareholders are Agnico and Kinross, who both have a little over 17%. After that would be management and insiders, which is predominantly the Power One Group and Shawn Ryan. That's about 23.5%. Eric Sprott joined us this year as a significant shareholder, so he's on top of that as a few percent. This was his first investment in the company. And then the balance is our public float, which is another 35 odd percent. And there's a few very sophisticated institutions in there as well. And then, retail kind of rounding out the balance there. In terms of cash, we're projecting 4 million in the treasury.
At the end of 2021 or
Sorry,
end of 2020?
Sorry, yeah, I guess I'm still kind of wrapping up things for our 2020 year. And, this year was a little different. I don't know if we get this into not, but with the COVID, everything kind of got pushed back by a couple of months. So I'm still sort of, like you see, we're still working on getting out our news flow for the 2020 season. And that's probably going to take another, it's going to continue here. And I think we should have some stuff out shortly. And then, more news to follow probably for at least another month or so.
What's the runway look like as far as the need to finance again in 2021?
Yeah, I can't answer that question right now because I don't know the answer. So this is the time of year where we'll sit down with our partners, Agnico and Kinross, and say, we've all, obviously they're well up to speed in terms of what we've done. They're phenomenal partners, really. From my experience, just if I can digress here for 1 second. Often you see a major sort of an investor and a junior, and they'll give them a little bit of money and say, go do what you're going to do and come back in the end of the year and let us know how it went. Whereas, these guys are on site regularly, not this year, unfortunately, COVID, but, the past few years, 3-4 times, senior members of their team, and they've really, worked to develop a plan for success for us and are, almost holding our hand to help us come down that path to sort of achieve this type of thing. So it's been a really phenomenal partnership. But back to your original question. So, they're well up to speed on what's happened and, participants and planning it all. And then now it's at this time of year where we kind of sit down and say, okay, what do we want to do next year? How's that going to look? Where do we want to focus? And, what's that going to cost? And then, we get into the discussion of, how do we finance that?
So we can certainly suspect at some point during the year there will be a financing.
You know what? Most like historically, that's been the case. This year is, we're in a very different gold environment. There could be some, type of corporate activities or non-dilutive type financing that may be potential. There's been a lot of discussions and ideas thrown around that may not follow our traditional route of just kind of equity financing at the beginning of each season.
Okay.
So time will tell. Yeah, but it's a good time. The market is sort of, for guys in our business, it's really in a strong place in terms of the availability of capital, looking for these types of opportunities.
There can be very good dilution that happens, and I think that in this case here can be very useful. So can you just talk about, again, just the importance of Shawn Ryan being at the company as really a cornerstone leader at White Gold, and just maybe talk to a moment about his just, unconventional means and methods like ground truth?
For people who sort of don't know too much about Shawn, I encourage you to go do a little bit of Googling. This is a guy that's really, he grew up in a mining camp in Timmins. He's sort of seen how it works, but he's just a true, he's one of these guys that's built and thinks on a different level. His curiosity has taken him through all these, wonderful excursions throughout Canada and led him to the Yukon as a mushroom picker. But his brain he's a data scientist, really is what he is, and he's always analyzing data, looking how to do things better. And he levered that type of approach to help become this successful mushroom picker, which supported his family financially while he was really prospecting in this historic part of our country that has never seen any types of modern day exploration. That's I don't know how many people, but he's the only guy I know that's made the cover of New York Times Magazine twice now for what he's done in the past, part of it for mushroom picking and part of it for these major gold discoveries that his novel methods have led to. And the Yukon's different than many places in the world. There's not a lot of outcrop, so which is what a lot of prospectors use in this business. But he was able to kind of crack the code in terms of soil geochemistry and how that can lead to different types of deposits and exploration success. So it was through him delineating the soil signatures, and it's not necessarily just gold. It's bismuth, arsenic, all these different elements that have these associations. Because believe it or not, this area of the Yukon was never glaciated, which is why the soils in place have been there for God knows how long, but long enough to sort of leach out these different elements, and that's what you need to use as your indicator. So he took this approach. It led to some very early success. It's the basis of most of our exploration. He's gone and developed what I believe is the largest soil geochemistry database in Canada, maybe even in the world. The company has now well north of 400,000 different soil samples in the district. As you mentioned earlier, our district is incredibly large. It's 400,000 hectares, which is about 1 million acres. But what it really represents, and not everyone really gets this, Shawn's been up there for so long now, going over these grounds, staking claims, dropping claims, that is, he's identified the mineralized systems for the most part. And once you do that, then you sort of start to layer on the more sophisticated levels of science, whether it's the structural type interpretations or others, or LIDAR and other types of investigatory work. So within these mineralized systems, this is what he's focused in on. And the claims that we kept are really 80% of the identified targets within our district. And to us, I view that as where we are today and where we are in the discovery cycle in this particular district. It's like owning the majority of some of these camps in like Timmins or Val-d'Or or Nevada 70 years ago, right? And put yourself in a time machine and say, hey, if I can go stake up 70% of Timmins or the Hemlo camp and go back in time, like what's that going to be worth today? And I fundamentally believe that is the opportunity we have. And if you're fast forwarding 5, 10, 20 years, we could be onto something like that. We are literally just scratching the surface. Shawn is doing a soil work with a tulip auger. The two big discoveries that's happened in the district in the last 10 years have literally been at surface. So now, when you're starting to see that, you have 20 million ounces of gold that's been in the creeks. Like, when is it camp at camp? You have Western Copper with 14 million ounces of gold. To me, all the signatures are there. We're scratching the surface. We're having success on the surface, and more than likely, there's going to be even more prolific resources as we go deeper.
That's excellent, and he's certainly committed, definitely, to white gold, and he just knows so much about the entire.
He knows more than anyone on the planet. There's no doubt about that. And what as he always says, he doesn't take a salary, but he's got the royalties, so he wants to see these things get into production.
Well, on this, let's transition into company plans for 2021. Maybe just talk about what work will be done across the projects and what will really be the core focus in 2021.
Yeah, for sure. The way we built our program, and basically since inception, we break up our project into kind of three different buckets. We have our advanced projects, which are the Golden Saddle and our ARC deposits, and now we've added the QB deposit. Last year we bought that from Comstock, and that's total is about 1.8 million ounces, just under. And we've done some very successful work in that regard over the last few years. Now, we are not a company that's here to delineate deposits, take them from indicated to measured or whatnot, right? Like, we're an exploration company. We want to be able to get the best bang for our shareholders' dollars, and that's by making new discoveries or making dynamic sort of increases to our existing resources. So that's what we focused on, just with regards to that those assets. And we've been very successful in that regard. When we acquired the assets, it was just a little from Kinross, or when they rolled it in for their equity interest, it was a little over 1 million ounces. We've grown this now to, as I mentioned, just under 1.8 million ounces, over 2 grams. And that, is now so I think that's a great success. The fact that the gold price has gone from $1,100 to $1,800, that's not our doing, but it's fundamentally increased the value of this deposit between the size of growth and the gold price. This, in my view, is very sort of unique in terms of its size and grade profile within the group of assets in Canada that are currently pre-development, right? So that list is very short. I'm pretty sure we're in the top decile. One of the studies I've seen not too long ago, and you've seen in some of the investor presentations, if you take all the assets in Canada, how many of those are over 1 million ounces? How many of those could produce 100,000 ounces a year? How many of those could have cash cost all in under $1,000? I think based on our internal studies, aren't like pre-feasibility or anything of that level yet. We fit that parameter bucket, and they're based on those studies, are not many of those around. So in terms of where are we in this gold market, where are we in the M&A cycle, I think we're very early on in the M&A cycle. We started to see a little bit of activity last year. Those are sort of some no premium deals. The premium is starting to get bigger, and as the more deals that happen, the prices start to go up. There's a fundamental reality that producers need to continue to increase their reserve base. They have not done much exploration in the last decade, so that particular asset in itself has now come on the radar of a lot of people. We truly appreciate the value there, and as I mentioned before, there's conversations around that of what to do, right? So there is some value which I think is certainly not being realized by the market, and that can be unlocked very easily. But it's a matter of what do we want to do that's going to create the most value for our shareholders. In terms of the work we've done last year, what you saw, and most likely this year, is we will continue to demonstrate the upside growth potential of that deposit, not by continuing to step it out or drill it, but by focusing on some new discovery potential and recent new discoveries within a very close proximity to that deposit. So last year you saw we did a bunch of diamond drilling on the Ryan Surprise target. That's 2 kilometers to the west. We encountered some phenomenally high grades on almost all the holes we drilled. We're talking 15 gram plus type material. That was our second season doing work on that. With the previous seasons, we also had similar type success. We think there's opportunity there for that to continue. It's left open in all direction. Likely we'll spend some more time over there just to sort of see how big it is, and trace it along strike some more, because those types of ounces, when they're that close to a deposit, that is immediately accretive, and you can really build that value with a very low sort of investment amount of dollars. So there's that target. There's a number of other targets. This is a distinct trend, actually. It's a couple kilometers to the west of the Golden Saddle. We've identified a couple of other targets there, which, based on the surface work we've done, look very prospective. So assuming we're going to want to go back and do some drilling on that, again, for the same reason why we wanted to do the work on the Ryan Surprise. And based on the success and what we saw on the Ryan Surprise, we're very, very excited about the prospects of these new targets, especially in consideration of how close they are to the Golden Saddle. So that's one area where we're going to be focusing on. The other second bucket is what I'll call more sort of our intermediary type targets, where it's, stuff where we've done we've done all the surface work, we've done the structural work. We've actually working with the new structural consultant the last year or so, really brought a new perspective to the district. It was the first time there, kind of opened our eyes up on a few things, and it's led to some discoveries, and we're certainly going to be following up on that with more drilling. So it's either targets that are being identified for first time drilling, or targets that we've done some drilling on and we think are pretty high priority. Some of the stuff in that category is our JP Ross project, which is road accessible. We have identified 6 or 7 targets there. We've done some had some great surface results trenching. We've done some RAB drilling, diamond drilling the Vertigo. That's been very interesting. Probably spent some time over there. Another, we've done some work on a Titan target, potentially some more work around there. One of the projects which we'll likely get to this year, which unfortunately, part of the challenge of having so many projects is you got to sort of prioritize, is our Betty project. And so Shawn always claims that this was everyone's favorite, when he first put this package together, and I can fully understand why. It's contiguous to Newmont's Coffee project to the east. It sits along the same structural trend. It's right on the Coffee Creek Fault. We've done some drilling there in 2018, and we had some very interesting results. One of those holes was 50 plus meters at a little over a gram, material that looked quite similar to what they'd seen over at Coffee, again, not surprisingly. And so that is a really something that we need to get back, and people want us to get back and work on. So we're going to be working there. I think that's that's where you want to be spending your dollars, right? You have very high indication and some past success, and based on where it is and what's going on with the Coffee, I think that it's going to be a very exciting target to do some work on. So that's part of it. There's a couple more which we're mulling over. So there will be, my guess is, a fairly substantial amount of drilling on some new targets in this intermediary bucket, which is probably the most exciting, because it's stuff there's a lot of smoke there, and now let's go find the fire.
Yeah, and David, on these particular projects, there's a lot of them, and it's hard for folks when you're spread it out on all the different projects at the same time. I guess my thought is from a strategy standpoint, does it make sense to delineate like Golden Saddle, to extend this to a point where it actually starts to look like a 200,000 ounce per year producer that's a 12-year mine life, et cetera? Do you think that from a share price perspective helps? Or do you think that touching on all of these with a series of smaller satellite deposits makes more sense? What's your thought just on price appreciation, which obviously it makes it easier to raise capital? What's your thoughts on how that drives forward?
I think from our perspective, right, if you look at what it takes to go from a deposit to, an economic feasibility study, this type of delineation drilling, that's sort of, I'm sure you're aware of the Lassonde curve. That's kind of like the boring part of the curve where you don't necessarily want to be in. So I think, first of all, our team, what's our skill set, what's our strengths? That's exploration and discovery. I think we'd be able to add way more value for our shareholders by making new discoveries in a close proximity. We know what we have there as a minimum, and I think that's a robust project. And I think instead of doing 50-meter step outs, to add a few thousand ounces here and there, by showing we have these multi-100,000 ounce, million-ounce deposits so close by, those are game changer type activity from my perspective. And maybe this kind of ties into what I was touching on before, is based on that type of a strategy, this project here has that type of merit, has that type of potential, but it needs to go to the next level, right? So our team is not designed to do that. We need to now go and figure out how we're going to take this asset and move it to the next level, because it doesn't serve anyone any interest to have it sitting here, not being fully appreciated by the market, because we're doing all these other different things. So it is a priority for us to come up with a game plan for that asset. Like I mentioned before, fortunately, we're in a strong market here where we have a lot of different alternatives in front of us. But I think strategically, it's the right time where we can really optimize the value of that for our shareholders. And then that will be crystallized, and maybe it's a sale, maybe it's a venture with one of our partners, maybe it's some other arrangement. I don't know, but something that's going to be highly accretive to the value of the White Gold share price.
Yes, and can I just add, just on the question there on the radius, the satellite deposits, what do you see as really a reasonable economic radius? Are we talking 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers? And then on top of that, if the market doesn't really realize the potential there, would you guys sell these off as you discover them and move on to the next one?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it depends, where are you in the development of a district, right? Right now, there's the coffee is sort of pretty much ready to be developed, and that's a decision for Newmont to make. The Golden Saddle, it still would need to go to a feasibility. Let's sort of fast forward a few years, and if things continue, let's say like the coffee goes into development, let's say the Golden Saddle goes into development, they're different styles, you have a mill, you have a heap leach. Now, anything you find in a district, like you see in Timmins, with the road system that the government's putting in place, that's basically economic ore. You find something, you shovel it up, and you truck it to one of these two different facilities, right? So with our package, we can be a feeder. Listen, the goal here is to find these multi-million ounce deposits, as we touched on earlier on. But let's just say, in addition to that, we start to find these few 100,000 little pods here and there. That is all real economic material to be able to put in place to some of these other facilities. Now, in today, we're not there yet, but I think you're kind of working for that vision of what will likely be the situation in the future. In terms of selling each, I think each deposit. Yeah, we are a project generator. We want to take these different projects we have, optimize the value, and then look to sort of monetize those in a form that makes sense. Today we haven't done that yet, but it's very much sort of part of our considerations, and we're working towards that. So is it a 200,000 ounce thing that is the first project that goes? Probably not. I think it's probably something that's going to go and take this Golden Saddle to the next level of feasibility and then into production, because now that re-rates the value of everything else in our district. And I think the really kind of exciting part, and I think that's what it makes sense to be doing, and that is kind of the interest that we're getting, and I think the way that it would make most sense for us to proceed and the district to proceed.
Yeah, and I want to try to get the potential across to the audience here, because we do like the strategy, but it's been difficult. It hasn't shown up in the share price, and that. And what's the thoughts on what you see that really needs to be done further here to start seeing the reflection in the share price?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right, and this is what I'm going to continue to focus on and take more opportunities like this. White Gold is effectively a super junior, right? You could easily break this company up into 4 or 5 different public companies. In fact, in 2011 and 12, when Underworld had their first big discovery, which Kinross bought for 120 million in the district, and Kaminak had their big discovery, which Gold Corp eventually bought for $500 million. There was a dozen different juniors in our district, right? And they were all Shawn Ryan properties. He optioned off his package to all of them. When the markets went south in 2012 and 2013, Shawn got all these properties back, and that's when he combined them all into one to make White Gold. So we are really the culmination of what was 10 or more different companies. If I were today to go break, I wouldn't do 10 companies, but let's say I broke this up into 3 different companies. The White Gold property, our deposit, the JP Ross, the stuff at the Betty beside Newmont, and the stuff in the north. I would almost guarantee that the value, the share price, the sum of those prices would be far in excess of what we're trading at today. Now, this is a double-edged sword. To have it all in one company, we're truly optimizing the prospectivity of success for our White Gold shareholders. But the challenge is, it makes this story a little bit more difficult to follow and you now also don't have as many people working in the district kind of waving the flag and banging the drum and trying to bring attention to the district. So that kind of the flip side of that. But what are we going to do? We need to continue and working and getting out to all the conferences, and this virtual conference circuit now is really helped because we can kind of sign up for as many as there are available, right? You don't got to get on a plane, get to Zurich, and spend 2 weeks and a lot of money to do it. It takes you a couple afternoons and whatever it costs to sign up to these meetings. And as the sophisticated investors take the time, understand the story, they really start to appreciate the unique value here, and that this thing is horribly undervalued right now. If you look at just our deposit alone, we're trading at, I don't know what it is, $40 an ounce, which is less than 50% of our peers. We may not even have the grade that we have, and that's giving no value to everything else. So it doesn't take long to figure it out. We just got to keep working and having people figure it out. This is kind of a little bit of a an ideal time for someone to invest if they wanted to. Sort of coming out of tax season, we're kind of in the planning point. Our work doesn't really start to for another couple of months. So this is a bit of a lull where you're starting to see people wanting to accumulate in advance of what's hopefully going to be a very active season again, and continue to see more and more M&A in the gold market, and hopefully us continue to execute on some of these potential strategic opportunities we have.
Yeah, David, I think you guys will create the best value continuing to do what you're doing, and that is more deposits, satellite deposits, maybe some big ones. I think that'll eventually get the attention that's well deserved as you guys move forward here. But on potential investors who are on the sidelines listening, market cap's about 98 million Canadian here, below our cost basis. What would you say to potential investors at this stage and at current price levels?
White Gold, like I touched on earlier, is a company that's realized the success that every junior wants to achieve. Traditionally takes, close to 10 years. It takes close to $100 million. We've done that in the golden saddle alone. So that's been done. You have that value there. We're trading, probably under that value, cash invested value, which is insane. So, that will get realized in this cycle. Pretty confident of that. So as your downside protection, which I think a lot of investors look at, I think that should provide a lot of confidence, and downside protection with really a lot of upside potential in that respect as well. Plus, you have this incredibly large package that's also seen tens of millions of dollars of work. It's identified numerous different targets, some of them being drilled for the first time, some of them that will be drilled, for the first time in the coming seasons. So you have this unparalleled new discovery potential. The more work we're doing, the more we're learning, the more it's actually increasing our confidence in the prospectivity of the district. And we're very, excited about the possibility for new, multi sort of million ounce type discoveries. That's what we're looking for. But the reality is, with what's already been discovered in the district, any ounce you find is accretive one way or the other. And the fact that you're in a tier 1 jurisdiction, you cannot underscore the value of that. We're investing all over the world, and you see it in the media these days. You never know what can happen. But when you're somewhere where you know the rules, you know the players, the majors have confidence to invest there, I think that says a lot. And that's the lead you want to follow.
And David, the best way for investors to reach out to you and the company?
Yeah, really welcome any and all sort of interest, and we're happy to have these conversations. Go to our website. There's actually a book a call feature right on the front page of the website. All our contact is in there, whitegoldcorp.ca, or you can reach us by email at ir@whitegoldcorp.ca.
Well, David, keep up the efforts to drive the value here. I really appreciate you taking the time, and thanks again for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having. Like I mentioned earlier, I've never been more optimistic about the opportunities and the prospectivities for this company, and tremendously excited and grateful to be able to participate with everyone, and really thank you for the support and your continued interest.